Like, this is like why my family left.
Oh my god, you're gonna make me cry.
You know, like my family left because they couldn't make it there. Sorry,
is so
CCP.
real. I'm gonna cry.
Yeah, and so I was like, you know, the coolest thing about this embroidery specific to the Meow tribe is that they actually don't have a written language. So they literally like story tell like their generations and their ancestors through like their embroidery. And this grandma actually was like, yo, my eyes are going like gone, freaking like 80. And she's like, yeah, these are actually like the last leftover textiles like from my bridal thingy. They're like scraps. And she was like, I'll just like give them to you, you know? And then I think that just brought me all back where I was like, yo, like it's really just not about the influencers and the clouds.
Is something really bad because it's made in China, or do you think that it's bad because you haven't actually dug into how it was even made?
A sustainable factory generally is a factory that has been audited quite frequently, and they will hit certain like marks of like certifications.
Standards, yeah.
Like international labor standards, like maybe their water usage or like LEED, you know. But it's like the definition of sustainability also differs, right? It's like, do you mean like living wage, social impact, like working with women, giving them maternity leave type of sustainability, or are you just talking about pure like no carbon emissions, like sustainability, right? So it's like factories can choose what kind of sustainability they're trying to sign on to, what ones they can actually clear, you know, just based on how they approach their supply chain. You can choose to make your clothes sustainably, which would then require you to like be more like uptight about your supply chain process, you know, and like that can bring like, I think, a lot of sustainable processes, but sustainable processes can happen at a super unethical factory, right?
Welcome back, finally, to another season of Changing Room Thoughts. It's been quite a hiatus, but I kick off season 3 of the podcast going back to my roots, going back to what I care about most, which is fashion supply chain. And that might not be sexy, but it is what is important and why I even started getting interested in fashion in the first place. That's a whole other story, like the corrupting nature of hype in fashion. That's for another episode. Why are brands so expensive? How does their marketing justify their prices to the consumers so effectively? My soul, my heart yearns to reconnect to these questions. That is why I am so excited, quaking even, to introduce you to a fashion tech girly I connect with on a different level. Becca Poo.
Hey.
Co-founder of Sour Gongju,
Yes.
which means sour princess
Yes.
in Chinese.
Yeah.
Becca and Sour Gongju could not possibly be a more perfect and whole combination of the things I could care about from an intellectual and personal level. As if conducting thorough analysis of sustainable manufacturing options wasn't enough to fulfill my fashion nerd fantasies, Becca also fights to keep the rare art of the Chinese Meow tribe woman's hand embroidery alive by modernizing silhouettes and selling to fashion girlies abroad. I'm beyond thrilled to have someone who understands me this deeply, and I'm enthused to share her adventures in apparel production and building an ethical brand with you all. Thank you, Becca, for joining us and kicking off season 3 of the podcast for anyone who has ever had a critical thought about the clothes that they put on their bodies.
Yeah. Yay. Thank you so much for having me. I think it's so rare to find Asian American girlies who care about fashion more than just like an outfit of the day, but as something that, yeah, is sustainable and slow and better for our planet and better for our souls. And so, yeah, I'm just happy to be here in New York.
New York.
The land of fashion.
So Becca lives in San Francisco right now.
I do. Foggy city.
She is, when I said fashion tech girly, I mean she is like me, full-time job in...
I do climate tech. I build climate change algorithms for the stock market to tell them how much money they're going to lose if they don't get it together. Yeah, so it's weird. It's a weird job.
No, that's very impactful because I also feel like people in finance and economics just don't care about sustainability, and the only way you can get them to care is by convincing them that they're going to lose money if they don't care.
100%. That's like the whole mission, and it's like we just slap a negative value on everything, you know. And they're like, "Oh my god." They're like, "Oh my god, we need to adapt." I'm like, "Yeah, no, actually though."
I actually had a little off topic, but I had a really kind of heartbreaking conversation with this VC guy I ran into at a hotel lobby. Long story.
Yeah.
But a very heartbreaking conversation, because this was someone who was part of a very, very like serious, I guess, sandhill institution.
Oh,
And he was asking me about my interest in sustainable fashion and things like that. And he was like, not to be a dick, but like, who cares? Yeah.
That's crazy.
Which is like, I get maybe from his, you know, like, I was definitely like blowing his mind a little bit. I was like explaining to him why he should care. He was like, wow, I never thought about that. I was like, yeah, do you ever think about who makes your clothes? He's like, no, I've never thought
Holy
about
shit,
that.
He really does not think about it.
No, he literally never thinks about
my
it.
God.
But it's also just, yeah, he's not gonna care unless, like, he doesn't care about the fashion. He doesn't really care about the sustainability.
Yeah.
But if you put dollars behind it, he's gonna care.
Yeah, and it's not even like, I guess like a tangent before we talk about other stuff. It's like for example with Levi's, like they're the best denim all around, you know, organic cotton type vibes. But denim just uses so much water, and one of their factories is actually in like South Africa and Cape Town, and they almost had to stop manufacturing completely because of ground zero, where like Cape Town, South Africa was gonna run out of water. And so it's not just like, oh, we should like make clothes that are less bad for the planet, but it's like when you innovate in fashion, like if you can figure out how to use less material, recycle materials, recycle your water usage, like the profits of a company will go up. Like if you never have to pay for water again for jeans, which is like 80% of the cost, like that's game changing. And so that's like why like Levi's like heavily cares about water recycling. Yeah. So I think it's like people just sometimes think that sustainability is about doing less bad or just like greenwashing and just being less harmful. But it's more so just about like actually pushing the needle forward of like more profit, more innovation, yeah, and more value for everyone. Yeah.
That's the real way to live.
Through these VC guys who don't know anything.
Seriously.
Literally, they don't know anything.
Yeah, like.
But also, if you want to marry me for money, please do. I could use investment.
Yeah, if you're a VC and you're single, hit her up. And then you'll never have to worry if your investments are going to a good cause ever again.
I can be your philanthropy. Just give it to me.
No, I love that. And I feel like you are the right person to be doing this work because you understand that. Like, I feel like there are so many people in sustainable fashion who have their hearts in the right place, but do not have the, like, critical analysis and like data analysis skills and understanding of climate and technology to understand the impact of what their sustainable or not actually sustainable brand is doing.
Yeah, definitely. I think like sustainability is so like in, and there's so many brands now just brand themselves as sustainable. But I think the truth of the matter is like we don't need to be making more clothes. Yeah, so I think a huge question behind Sour was always like, is this worth doing? Like, does the world need more sustainable clothing? And for us, like, the answer was, like, the world doesn't necessarily need, like, more sustainable clothing, but it does need more, like, indigenous, like, clothing from rural China. And so that was our why. And then the how for us was going to be sustainability. Yeah, but I think sometimes, like, just having your why being for sustainability is not enough, you know? Yeah, because more clothes is still more clothes. Yeah,
that's a very good point. I think there's also some merit in like innovating upon the way that clothes are made in and of itself. Like, do we need more clothes? No. Will more new clothes continue to be made? Yes. Like, if we're going to take ourselves out of our sustainable fashion utopia, we know for a fact that, like, fashion as an industry is going to keep barreling forward.
Yeah, it's going to keep happening.
So how can we, if it's going to stay alive, how can we make it hurt the least?
Yeah, 100%.
And how can we do it in a positive way that can support the livelihoods instead of like destroy the livelihoods.
Yeah, and like how do we
people who make our clothes.
Yeah, and like how do we change the system? You know, because like when one brand I think really innovates, then like others will follow. It's like when you prove that something can be done a certain way and change the status quo, then usually like other brands will follow. And so we definitely are, I think, progressing forward just as like a fashion space.
It sounds like when you say that when a brand innovates, other ones will follow. Has there been a brand that you've been following that you feel is kind of a leader?
That's hard. I think the realty is that I don't shop that much.
No, that's
TBH.
the right answer.
So I don't
That's
know
the
that
right
many
answer.
brands, but I guess in general, I feel like I think if you told me like 5 years ago, like before COVID, that some of the hottest sellers on Instagram will be like these people who just like upcycle like random shit and make it into these like one-off pieces that like you're never gonna be able to buy again. And they're just like these small sellers. Like I think like there's like this brand like I don't know how it's like Robo or something, but like I honestly probably butchered that. But yeah, they like totally just like upcycle just random denim into these like crazy like silhouette pieces. And they're usually one of a kind items. And like they've been doing that, I think, for like a few years. And a lot of brands are following up now. Yeah. And so I think the idea that you can actually sell old clothes and that's like made just one of one is like a new concept. And that truly is like sustainable the whole way, you know? Yeah. And I think that's kind of been blowing up.
I've been having this thought a lot recently that taking fashion back to its roots and back to the way fashion used to be produced is an inherently more sustainable move.
Yeah, tailors. Bring back tailors.
Bring back
2K25. Bring them back.
No, literally, because like people used to have like a family tailor.
Yeah.
You buy like one suit and it's very well made. It's supposed to last you the year or like a few years or your lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like made to order now is this hype thing in the sustainable fashion apparel manufacturing circles that's like, oh yeah, it's kind of expensive, but it's the better thing to do because you don't create any clothing that doesn't get consumed, but your unit costs are a lot higher because you're not purchasing things at scale, so you can't like apply a discount. It's being seen as this like cool new innovative thing, but that was how clothes were made to begin with. Like that was always how they used to be made.
When Kamala is like the coconut did not just fall from the tree or some shit, that is true about fashion. You know, it's like we're not really reinventing anything. Like tailors know what they're doing, and it's sad that a lost craft, but it's like I think it's like in industry, it's all about you find your fit model, you find your measurements, and you try to create a one size or like one silhouette kind of fits all for mass production. But I think that's a lot of reasons why so many, I think girls especially, were just like, yo, no clothes ever fit me. No jeans ever fit me.
They literally weren't made to fit you.
Yeah.
They were literally made to fit the average between like an entire population of humans.
Of all humans. And that's really crazy. Like we really struggle with sizing too at Sour. And it's just like, how do we have like a fit model that's inclusive for everyone? And it's like, I think it's like, okay, well, some silhouettes do look better on certain body shapes than others. And so it's like, how can we design for something to look the cutest but also make sure that it fits everyone? Yeah. And I think it's like if we actually just all kind of had a tailor, it would actually make my life easier too. You know, where I'm like, oh my God, what is like the average length between like the butt cheek and like the top of the thigh for all human beings? And that's just like a tough thing to find. Yeah.
Something you've mentioned too is that a lot of, by the way, we're obviously wearing some Sour Gongju. And if you could see this embroidery up close, it's insane that this is hand embroidered. Like I'm like, there's no way this isn't done by a machine, but it is hand embroidered. It's insane. It's so neat.
Yeah, and you can tell though, because there is just like some random gaps.
Yeah,
where you're like, oh, like a machine wouldn't do that. Yeah.
But I do want to talk a little bit more about like your approach to modernizing this folk art. Like, tell us a little bit about how you went about doing that.
I was actually inspired by a friend from college, Isha. She has her brand Hut Mentality, and Hut Mentality essentially uses South Asian arts and textiles, and she makes them into like low-key like also mini skirts. Like she just launched a new line, and it's like really good. But I don't know. I think for me, like East Asia just has never really, I think, had prominent brands that use like their artisan textiles in the same way that I think South Asia has.
That's so true. I feel like so many Western brands have kind of stolen the aesthetic of the Orient, the Far East, the mysterious Asian people. But like don't actually invest in like the craft.
No. Yeah. And it's like, I think like the most natural, like, I don't know, Orient look is like the cheap out. And so many Western brands like will innovate off of it. And so many Asian brands too, like Asian American brands are also trying to sell that stuff too. But truthfully, like, I think like China in itself is such a big and diverse country. And it is there's like 57 tribes, you know, that make up China. And the Qipao was honestly only like maybe a 50-year period of Chinese history that for some reason like we just grappled onto as like the national like thing to wear. And that's just not true. You know, that's just not what people have been wearing.
Yeah, people here, especially in America, right? People see Asians as a whole as like one monolith, much less Chinese people. Like they think like one kind of Chinese culture, Han Chinese. Or even as a Chinese American, it took me a while until I was much older to realize how many minority groups there are in China and how diverse the culture is. Like I have a friend who's born and raised in China, and she traveled to this town that was on the border between China and Thailand. Yeah. And you forget that China borders Thailand.
Yeah, so no, that place is lit.
Yeah, the culture in that area is a mix of Thai and Chinese. Yeah. And depending on the geography of where you are, it's a completely different culture. If you get closer to Mongolia, it's different. If you're closer to the coast, it's different.
Yes, I think I just have some relatives who are like of like non-Han Chinese descent. And so I don't know. I think I've just always known that there has been such beautiful textiles. And and I think seeing Isha do her thing with Hut Mentality, I was like, you know what? Maybe there is something we can do here. For some reason, there's not any brand or just like, you know, even there's like not even museums collecting this embroidery. Why don't I just go check it out? So then I literally just like woke up one day and I was like, okay, how do we get textiles? Like, where do we even find textiles? And it was really interesting because I just couldn't find anywhere to purchase it on Taobao or, I don't know, eBay. But I did find a lot of white collectors of textiles on Etsy. And they were selling them for like hundreds of dollars. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I was like, yo, like my grandma makes this shit, but it's like $300 on Etsy. And I was like, oh man, like I wish I could be selling this for $300. Yes, I think that really, made me just really want to go check it out. And then once I just like got my ass out to southwestern China to Guilin, I think it was really difficult seeing that there just wasn't a lot of Chinese tourists who cared about the embroidery there. Yeah. And you actually just saw a lot of local people actually selling knockoff embroidery that is if you went to Arizona and you dressed up as Pocahontas to like kind of cosplay native life. I think that's kind of what the tourism industry is like in southwestern China. You'll see a lot of like Han Chinese people from other like bigger cities visiting the countryside, cosplaying these indigenous,
appropriating like
and like having like $1 versions of this. And and so I think just seeing that, I was like, you know what, like I am Chinese American. I'm obviously not tribal born, you know, my Chinese is really sucky. I also don't really make clothes, you know, like it's not like I went to fashion school. But I think there is something here where I do feel like a responsibility to steward this beautiful art. And I think because of the fact that I am Western, I do value these things a little bit more than I think people from like China mainland for some reason. Maybe because in the West, we know how rare it is to have handmade embroidery. But in other areas of the world, it may be that like they're looking more for like factory innovation than like handicrafts.
Or they're just like culturally enamored with cultures that are very different than their own.
And so sometimes it's just hard to see the value of something like right in front of you. But I definitely think I struggled with the question of like, am I the right person to do this? Like,
no, you're the right.
You know, like, is there someone else who's like tribal born, who makes clothes, who could sell this stuff? But I think for some reason, like being Asian American and feeling the marginalization there,
Yeah.
and also just like the struggle there, made me feel like I connected more with like these village ladies, and I just like saw, you know, how hard life was, and I was like, you know, like this is like why my family left.
Oh my god, you're gonna make me cry.
You know, like my family left because they couldn't make it there. Sorry,
is so
CCP.
real. I'm gonna cry.
Yeah, and so I was like, you know, like what better way for me to give back than to maybe give these ladies a livelihood in a way
Yeah.
that my family couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like hear from America back to them, and who else will pay for this shit than Americans who are wealthy?
Yeah, fuck those white girls on eBay
Yeah, I know, man.
or Etsy, wherever.
No, don't buy that stuff.
Yeah, don't buy that shit.
Just buy it from like a Chinese wholesaler
Yeah.
at least. Don't buy it from them. Yeah.
No, but real talk
Yeah.
though, like I feel like like my eyes are getting a little watery because that hits fucking deep, dude. Like no one understands these women the way you do, even though, you know, you're both technically Chinese and you've grown up in such a disparate environment, but like you feel for them, you have that empathy for them.
Yeah.
Don't question that.
Okay.
You're the right person for this.
Thanks.
Because like nothing like this has existed before.
It hasn't.
It hasn't, right? There's a reason
If there
why.
is, let me know.
Yeah.
So I can pawn it off to someone. So I can go back to other things.
No, literally, because
Yeah,
it's a hard life. You
Yeah.
got your climate tech job full time, and then you're trying to start a whole sustainable brand. You are absolutely 100% the right person for this because you have that empathy for these women. You see them in a way that maybe the people around them don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and clearly you're very thorough. You're gonna do right by them.
Thanks.
And you're not gonna produce things in a way that would harm any member of the community. And the fact that you're willing to do all of that, because this shit is hard. Like you could
Doesn't make that much money, guys.
it doesn't make that much money.
not-
You do it
yeah.
out of love.
It really is. I think
Yeah.
it's like I could make so much more money out of VC, you know, but I think when I did Fashion Week, I got just like a little bit caught up in all of the, you know, like the clout driven stuff of Fashion Week, and I was just like around all these influencers and all these brands were all about, it's just about, you know, making
It's
that money and getting that
corrupting.
clout.
It's so corrupting.
And I was like, whoa, like I'm like stressed. Like,
Yeah.
how are we gonna make this happen? Like, how are we gonna scale? Like, we gotta find influencers.
It's not real fashion. I
yeah.
feel like 2024, 2025, and the reason why I'm one of my missions trying to bring back season 3 of Changing Room Thoughts is like,
Yeah.
let's bring the love of fashion back to the love of actually fashion, like back to the love of clothes, back to the love of community,
Yeah.
back to like sharing culture with people as opposed to clout chasing. Like, I'm so tired of this shit.
No, and it's like I think Fashion Week, it was like just a really hard week for me because it just like I just didn't give a fuck about a lot of I think designer stuff, but then like I was like I think I just like felt the need to during that week because I was like, oh, like we're such like imposter syndrome, all these big
No,
brands.
There's so much peer pressure.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, half the people, sometimes, like, these events, it's like,
They don't even care.
they don't even care.
They just don't
They
even care about their own
don't even
clothes.
care.
They don't even believe in their
They
own clothes.
they don't believe in their own
And
clothes.
the-
About the symbolic. They don't
Yeah.
care about the clothes. They care about what the clothes say about them.
Yeah, and so.
Yeah.
But then I went back to China to fulfill some orders, and I just like backpacked the same route again. And I don't know, I think it just calmed me down. I think I just talked to these ladies again, and this grandma actually was like, yo, my eyes are going like gone, freaking like 80. And she's like, yeah, these are actually like the last leftover textiles like from my bridal thingy. They're like scraps. And she was like, well, I'll just like give them to you. You know, and then I think that just brought me all back where I was like, yo, like it's really just not about the influencers and the clouds and the real. It's like whatever we're doing, like we can make impact by just like a few dollars and just validate an experience that this textile will go somewhere and be preserved somewhere
Yeah.
or remade into a new life.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and just continuing on that history because it probably is not going to be continued on honestly in those regions in China.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just humbled me and I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna
There are more important things.
yeah, there are more important things. This lady be making the last textile of her life and I'm gonna buy it, you know.
No,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so people are like, yes, tradition, craftsmanship
Yeah.
about like a Louis Vuitton canvas bag, right?
Yeah.
What about this grandma that's going blind selling her bridal embroidery, right?
Yeah.
There are levels to appreciation for fashion and what you do. Like, you truly love fashion. Like, forget about getting a degree in like fashion design or any of that shit. Like, that's the only necessary ingredient, in my opinion, to be a brand that at the very least I love and I will shout about at the top of my lungs, like from the mountaintop. Yeah, so I really appreciate everything you do.
Thanks. And I think the coolest thing about this embroidery, specific to the Meow tribe, is that they actually don't have a written language. So they literally like story tell like their generations and their ancestors through like their embroidery. So obviously this is not like a familial, like it's not a lineage embroidery, but like some of the embroidery, like I saw like it'd be like how many threads they use or how many lines, it'd be how many generations came. And like some of our stuff has like dragons or butterflies or fish, and different like families will have like different ancestors. And so some families will just have ancestors that they only see as butterflies. And then through the years, generations, these ancestors have thrived in these mountains. And so, yeah, it's just like, I think sometimes we see these animals or these mountains and we're like, whatever, granola, branding. But no, it's like actually for them, it's like their aunt who passed, you know, and it's like there's numbers of generations. Yeah, so it was just really powerful. And that's kind of how they keep their history, because they don't have a written language. And that's why every lady usually in the village knows how to embroider.
Wow.
Yeah, because that's like knowing how to write, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So it's really
Wait, so
cool.
how many ladies work with Sour Gongju?
So every line is different. So right now we work maybe with like 5 to 10 ladies, but it's more like the ladies have other stuff to do, you know. So like we don't like fully employ them, but like they have other shit to do. Like they're also like tour guides, you know what I mean? Or they have like farms. And so essentially it's like we just kind of have a co-op of these village ladies who all kind of know each other, and sometimes they'll call more people over, or some people like won't be working a certain like order. But yeah, we just put in like a number order, and however they kind of want to fulfill it, they fulfill it, and then they split the cost of doing it. Because I guess it's like every thread does take time, and so they just have to kind of figure out how that can work with their schedule. Yeah.
So how many hours does it take, for example, to embroider this corset that I'm wearing right now?
So essentially, I think they said that this much, like this, I think like 2 inch by 2 inch, that takes like maybe like 30 minutes. Yeah. And so they go pretty fast. Yeah. But that's a lot of time.
This is a lot of time. And you sell these corsets at like, how much again?
It's like $128.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Some people are out here buying like streetwear cotton t-shirts for that amount.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's so well priced.
Oh, slave. Good.
Like there are like shitty acrylic free people like sweaters that I've considered buying at the same price, which is insane.
Yeah. And so essentially like each panel, like we pay, I think like $6 for, which is like literally no money. But yeah, but I like that's like basically a lot of money for them, you know, because like everything's really, really cheap. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a bit about the process. I think you talked to me about this on the call before, but like from beginning to end, like what is the life of a Sour Gongju garment?
Yeah, so we always start with textile first. And so sometimes I get like comments where like, whoa, like good job on designing that textile. And I'm like, I did not design the textiles, guys. Like I did not imagine this color scheme or embroidery. But basically what happens is I will go into like the region, and right now we're working with the Meow people. I'll look at the embroidery that they have, just like literally at the market, and I'll be like, yo, I think we can use this one for anything. And so essentially it starts with textile first, and I essentially ask if they can like make more versions of it, because sometimes it is like a one-of-one textile that has like 50 years old and they don't make more of it. But this is like something that they're just making in general, and then they can make a bunch of because it's easier to make. So I pick the textile and I'll basically just like think of a silhouette that I think would really make the textile shine. And so these I really liked it for like corsets and like patchwork. Yeah. And so once I get the textiles, then I essentially work with a LA seamstress in LA to kind of do some sample sizing and try to build out a sample that would be like a good silhouette for a more Western audience and also figure out sizing essentially. Yeah, and then once that sample is made, then I basically communicate with a family of tailors I have in Shanghai, and they'll basically help me like standardize the sizing and like find like what kind of lining do we need or like what kind of zipper do we need. Yeah, so that's the whole process. But a lot of it really is just like they already have their system. And I like don't really fight it. I'm just like, yeah, for sure. Like whatever you can make, I'm gonna just take it.
So you buy the textiles, you do like sampling and sizing, and the family of tailors in Shanghai help you with like the final sample.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the cut and sew, do they do that
They
as well?
also do it too.
Oh,
so like
okay,
we'll just
gotcha.
put in like small batch orders with them. And yeah, there's essentially like this one last tailor market, South Bund Shanghai Tailor Market. It's like one of the last remaining ones like ever. And yeah, there's maybe 40, 50 tailor markets there.
Wait, you mean like last tailor market? What do you mean
Yeah,
by
so
that?
it's
Like,
just a market just for you to get stuff tailored.
oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and you can
It's
also
dying?
order clothes there. Yeah, so like I think essentially like a lot of Chinese clothes are just manufactured.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So there used to be like a booming tailor industry in
Right.
Shanghai and like London, Hong Kong. So yeah, it's like the last standing one, and it's so funny. Like you show up, you'll see all white people, because white people like tailors. But yeah, no one who's like actually Shanghainese be shopping at that like tailor market. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how did you arrive at this conclusion of your supply chain and production? Because I remember we were talking about like, oh, you did a lot of research into like cut and sew manufacturers and facilities.
Yeah. So from the beginning, I was like, whatever we make, we have to go with a sustainable period. Like we're not gonna do this crazy child slavery route. You know what I mean? And so I was like, we're not doing that. But usually what happens when a person wants to make anything, what happens is you go online and you find a sourcing agent. The sourcing agent basically charges you an obnoxious crazy fee because they're probably some Mandarin speaking Westerner in China or in some other Asian country. And then they have a list of factories that they work with. All the names, information of that factory is hidden, so you can't actually negotiate with the factory yourself. And then they just find you whatever you need. So you're like high MOQ, low MOQ, you only want to make sweaters, you want to make athletic wear, you want to make furniture, they'll just go find it for you. But then mostly companies like Nike, they work with sourcing agents. A lot of times that's kind of why they don't know their vendors, because the whole business strategy of these sourcing agents is for you to know nothing.
Right.
And you just negotiate the contract with them, right?
Yeah.
Because like the odds of you going to Asia on your own is just
figuring
like
it out.
low,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah, so I did a call with a few sourcing agents, and then I was like, man, I feel like I can just find these people if I just really use Google Translate on like Baidu.com.
Yeah.
And so, so that's literally what I did. I like just like was looking for factories on Baidu.com using really bad Chinese Translate on Google. I basically was looking at women manufacturing silk manufacturers in like the Shanghai region because I was like, I'm probably gonna work with silk, and so I want them to know how to use that, and I want them to be sustainable. And I was looking through some sustainability like credit, like certification sites that people can sign on to that audit stuff, so I can make sure that they are sustainable. But honestly, there just like weren't that many, and it just seemed like China factories just wasn't gonna be the route. So then I was looking at just like on Google sustainable factories and manufacturers, and Bali just kept coming up. Yeah, like Bali and Vietnam. And so I was like, okay, like there are a few Australian run factories in Bali that were just super like fair trade, sustainable, like the whole shebang, like living wage, and you could tour them. So I was like, okay, let me try to do that. And there were like other factories also in Vietnam that had a similar vibe, but they like weren't Australian run. I think there was like Vietnamese run.
Right.
Yeah. And I found some of them also off the website of like Everlane, like they work with a Vietnamese manufacturer. Yeah, so I literally showed up to Bali and I was like, we're gonna find, these factories. Like I emailed them. I like just got in this taxi and I was like, we're gonna go to Denpasar. And then we just And the guy was like, okay, like, you're not going to the beach? I was like, no, we're going to the press.
I'm here on business.
I know. So we showed his factory, and I'm like, hey, and I'm like touring these factories. Yeah, so that's kind of what the vibe was. I just showed up, had an address, had one email. We made a WhatsApp group chat. I showed up. We talked about samples, the prices. And yeah, Bali is just a super sustainable, awesome place to manufacture it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they are kind of working with like teams of female tailors, and they just call it like a factory. But yeah, they definitely do amazing stuff there. Yeah, but I think one of the reasons why I ended up going with a team of Chinese tailors was because Bali has really high import prices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think like their skill set is not really conducive to like high end like mini skirts. You know, they're
Right,
kind of making
yeah.
more like lounge wear,
Right.
or like swimsuits for the
Less of like the
Australians.
structure.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I think seeing the team of tailors at the Bali factories being super happy living wage, and I was like, oh, maybe I can just like replicate something like that in Shanghai when I know there's like a tailor market, and I know it's
Right,
like really dying, but I was like, okay,
Well,
I want
let's support
more of
them.
that. And I was like, low MOQ, super hands on.
Right, because they can be
Yeah.
made to order and more
Yeah.
custom.
And it's like,
yeah.
I know exactly who I'm working with. I know exactly what I'm paying them. There's no middle agent.
Yeah.
They set their prices, And I'm just like way more comfortable with that than even working with like a factory manager.
Right,
It's like,
'cause you
what
don't
if the
know.
ladies are just happy on the day I visit and
Right.
just suffering on the other days? I have no
Yeah.
clue. But like, just I think working with this Taylor family, I just know that they have all the agency and autonomy. And so I'm like, okay, like we'll just do that. Obviously, it's like if I end up making like hundreds and hundreds of like corsets, it's gonna be like a different story. And I might need to like
Scale. Yeah.
scale and maybe actually get with like a factory or
Yeah.
just maybe hire a few families of tailors and have
Right.
my own cooperative.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely like, yeah, everything is honestly Googleable. Like you'd be surprised how much you can learn on Google. Yeah. So don't pay no sourcing agent. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
No, honestly, that is so illuminating too. And I want to talk a bit about like that lack of transparency around supply chain and
Yeah.
the real nerdy shit. I was so excited to get into this with you because very few people have actually like dug into it the way that you have. And I think that's such a valuable resource for anyone who
Yeah.
wants to get into like creating their own garments and want to do it in a meaningful and ethically considerate way.
Yeah.
But I do think it's really interesting that you brought up the fact that there are these sourcing agents and they're kind of these gatekeepers of knowledge, and that they're a big reason why even if we want to push for fashion brands to be more sustainable, they're kind of stuck there is because of the existence of these agents. I also wanted to talk about like what you mentioned around the economics of sustainable fashion.
Yeah.
And when like you ask these agents for a sustainable factory, why is it that when we, like all of these sustainable brands, Everlane, for example, which is very questionable on their sustainability, right? Like a lot of these sustainable brands that like greenwash, why they charge such high prices. And I feel like most people assume it's because, oh, well, people are being paid a living wage. People are, all of these other things that cost more and are directly related, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not. I think like sometimes when you think I'm buying sustainable fashion, we have this like idea where it's like the cotton is grown by a happy farmer family and it's organic, and then it ships to a happy factory where it's like super bright and happy and they get paid so much money. But that's not true. What happens usually is there's a bunch of factories, and oftentimes a factory will work with multiple different brands, right? And so like the same factory that can be making shit for like Gucci, they're probably also making shit for like H&M. And sometimes that's why you see like these products that are honestly very similar across multiple brands. They're probably just coming from the same factory, except like they're just, like marketed or branded or a little bit different. And so factories contract out by orders. So a company may not always work with the same factory. They may also be just switching different factories, always hunting for the best deal. Some factories don't have the same capabilities as other factories. So there's always a deal orientation around factory and orders. I think there's a difference between like a sustainable factory and then a factory that makes clothes sustainably, Like a sustainable factory generally is a factory that has been audited quite frequently, and they will hit certain like marks of like certifications.
Standards, yeah.
Like international labor standards, like maybe their water usage or like LEED, but it's like the definition of sustainability also differs, right? It's like, do you mean like living wage, social impact, like working with women, giving them maternity leave type of sustainability, or are you just talking about pure like no carbon emissions, like sustainability, right? So it's like factories can choose what kind of sustainability they're trying to sign on to, what ones they can actually clear, just based on how they approach your supply chain. You can choose to make your clothes sustainably, which would then require you to like be more like uptight about your supply chain process, and like that can bring like, I think, a lot of sustainable processes, but sustainable processes can happen at a super unethical factory, right? Like,
like this factory hasn't been cleared for these certifications, but maybe they're not necessarily overworked, or like they are paid a decent amount.
Yeah, so it's like I wouldn't clear any sustainable certifications probably because I don't really count as a factory, and there's like a lot of things. Yeah, but it's like just because something is certified sustainably does not mean that they're also doing things sustainably. They could also have subsets of their factory that are doing sustainable things, and then like subsets that aren't, right? And so it just really depends. There's like ranking orders to like the certifications you can get. It's easier for bigger factories to get certification, but because just by the ability to like control a setup.
So what's less important than saying, oh, I work with XYZ factory, which has XYZ certifications, it's just better for the brand to be transparent about each step in their production process and who is performing that task, how they're being paid, and what their living conditions are like.
Yeah, and I think like the industry is moving that way. I think like what's really important is not necessarily the certifications your product has, because there's like a lot of ways to get around certain certifications, but it's really just about vendor lists. Like I think Nike one time launched a like transparency vendor list where they just like listed all their vendors on a map. Like that's super awesome to just like know where are your clothes coming from, maybe some information about that factory. And it's like also like what is the makeup of your factory workers that are women or like refugees or because like a lot of times factory workers are gonna be like honestly refugees from like some other country to get that like lower wage work. So I think it's better to be transparent about just exactly what is going on versus like certifications, which is easier to market, but a lot of times it doesn't mean that much.
There was also one thing we talked about during our call that I found very illuminating around like pricing for sustainability, about how things are priced on the margin. Can you explain a little bit more about that, and maybe how like consumers are a bit misled by sustainable companies sometimes by their high prices and what that means for like the quality of their clothes?
I think the number one lie is that it's harder to make clothes sustainably. That's not really true. I think like obviously cotton versus polyester is going to be cheaper, but there's not that much of a price differential in terms of US dollars between something that is sustainably made and something that is not sustainably made, and this doesn't really include like super high end, like crazy materials that you can't really find, but like Everlane is a company that's kind of notorious for crazy price markups, and like, their clothes probably only honestly take maybe like $30 to $40 to make. Like one of their sweaters, probably not that much, maybe even less because they're probably producing at scale. But like I could make the same sweater that Everlane does probably for $40 with like maybe like a 20-piece MOQ. And obviously it's like I'm not paying for the type of marketing that they're paying for, so my cost would be lower. But just to make like a solid whatever sweater or thing they're selling does not cost that much money, even if it is super sustainable. So usually what happens in the fashion industry is like in other industries, sometimes like you sell stuff just based on like I made this pie for $5, I'm gonna sell it for $10, a $5 profit. But in the fashion industry, it's like you have your price that you pay the manufacturer for, and usually the price that you sell that is going to be 3 to 4 times more like what you pay to make it, because it's like you need to pay yourself that money. You also theoretically pay that company that money, or like you want your company to earn that amount as well. And then you also kind of, I guess, take in consideration marketing costs and stuff. But a lot of it that is just kind of BS. But like that's why like places like Urban Outfitters and even like H&M and Zara are charging like $100 for pieces that honestly cost probably $10 to make.
It's about the investors' incentives. Like the alignment of investment in fashion does not make it so that sustainability is a priority by any means. And that's not a surprise to anyone. Like we live in a capitalist society. So that's not a surprise. But what is a bit surprising, I guess, like when we talked about this, when I learned about this, like 3 to 4 times markup, is like, that's a choice. It is a choice. It is a choice, which is why supporting independent brands, like that's a factor of sustainability I think a lot of people aren't paying attention to, is like, who is pulling the strings behind this brand? Is there some kind of corporate overlord that's like invested in and has majority shareholder or like shareholder ownership over something, and they're the ones that are kind of pulling the strings? Or is this a designer that has complete control because they haven't really taken outside investment and they're just not choosing to make things sustainably and pricing it in an accessible way?
And I think it's like with fashion specifically, it's like there's always that pressure for investors of big public companies to just grow with each collection. But it's just like that's just not really how fashion works. Like the prices of clothes, like it's not getting more expensive to make clothes. You know what I mean? Like,
because wages are stagnant. Like wages don't increase.
It's not like in the US where it's like, oh man, you know, like we have minimum wage increases. No, like that's not really how it works overseas. It's like a factory wants to get paid more, they just get cut out, and then you find a cheaper factory, right? Or you move somewhere that has cheaper factories. Like that's why people may be moving out of China to manufacture and instead moving to like Bangladesh or like Vietnam, because they do have like now just like slightly lower wages in like China. But yeah, it's not like the prices of making clothes are rising, and it's not like cotton is more expensive, you know, like it's not like that. Like inflation doesn't really affect, I think, raw materials like that, especially in fashion where it's all about just the low. Yeah, and so the fact that clothes prices are still rising, like, you know, it's so
purely
expensive.
To keep
it's
up
purely just to do crazy
to keep
stuff.
up earnings
just to
reports
fuck with consumers.
The only incentive is for companies to keep up earning expectations and stock prices.
100%. And it's just like for us at Sour, our clothes can honestly be sold a lot cheaper, and I'd be super happy to do that. It's mainly we price the way we are because I just want to be in like a higher quality pricing range. So it just doesn't feel like
it
weird.
is part of the marketing.
Yeah, it's part of marketing. I feel like if I price lower, people are like, what is this? You know what I mean?
Right.
But
How
like,
is this actually sustainably manufactured?
Yeah. But
and it's also like, already priced very well. Like even at this price, like it is like, for relative to how much labor went into this, is like very fair.
Yeah. And just to be transparent, it's like, I think my tailors earn
get you an independent designer that tells you how much this shit costs.
I think it's like 10 to 15 US dollars to make a corset for the tailor. And then it's like I have like, you know, these panels that each cost like also a few US dollars. And then like my 100% mulberry silk, you know, highest grade mulberry silk is literally like also a few dollars. And so it's like and this is coming from someone who doesn't have a sourcing agent, and I'm buying stuff just at cost. Like I'm not like bargaining, you know, because like I don't have that high order quality yet.
And also like you have the policy where the embroiderers, the tailors, they literally tell you how much they want to be paid.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna argue with that. It's like a few US dollars, you know. So, but it's like so when people tell me like, oh, this would make like it costs $80 to make this, like no, it doesn't. It cost me like max $30-$40 to make something like this.
That's that transparency.
Is like the highest quality you can probably make it as. So if I see something like this in store, and if it's factory made, not hand tailored, using not 100% silk, then I'm like, there's no way it's like gonna be more than what I'm paying
That is
for.
so fucking
So,
true.
and then I'll be like, oh, it costs like $200 to buy. And I'm like, no, like that doesn't make sense. And so there's no way. Yeah. And I think it's like in the same way, that's why when you go to Asia, you see so many of the same stuff you buy here, but it's like $2, you know, because like it
Yeah.
really is that cheap to manufacture
Yeah.
overseas, and we just
Yeah.
like overcharge here.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. And okay, wait, this is the perfect segue into talking about the connotations of made in China. Because like,
Yeah.
right, all of these connotations around price and where it was manufactured, and are the people who made this, are they happy making it at that price, right?
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with a friend who I love and respect very dearly, and he was like, I don't consider something designer if I find out that it's been mostly made in China.
That's
And
crazy.
I know. I was like, okay, hold on a second. Because, like, there's a
Yeah.
little bit of maybe, like, internalized xenophobia we gotta, like, undo here. But I also don't blame him. Like,
Yeah.
because I also used to have that assumption about things that were made in China. And, you know, we all know about, like, oh, Shein is evil. And there are so many, like, cheap things that are made questionably that are coming from out of China. But, like we said about the diversity of China, right? And clearly, like, your garments are technically also made in China, but they're more like, they are more handicraft, sustainably made than many things in other places.
Yeah.
Like, you are literally supporting a tribe of women.
It do be true.
Yeah,
There do be a
literally
tribe of
supporting
women.
a tribe of women for a dying art. And it's like slow fashion, sustainably made to order. But it's still going to, some people are still going to have the wrong idea of it because you cannot help but slap the label made in China on it. I don't blame people for assuming this because no one gets to your level of digging into how things are actually made. Like, yes, it's wrong to assume that everything that says made in China on it is just like shit quality.
Yeah.
But it's because no one is going to go to like a sourcing agent and ask about all these different factories and how much they cost and how much these people are paid and try to find the tailors. And most people don't think about their clothes that much. And most people shouldn't. They have other things to do. They're not interested in fashion. They need to go about their days and their jobs. But that's something I wanted to highlight is something really bad because it's made in China? Or do you think that it's bad because you haven't actually dug into how it was even made?
Yeah.
Like, it could be made in Italy technically and still, like, there's actually a documentary about the exploitation of North African migrant workers in Italian factories, and it's technically made in Italy.
Yeah. I think number one is like I think we hear the same with like, oh, it's made in the USA. And we try to like really brand around that, at least with cars and stuff. But I think number one, things are made in many places. There's not honestly probably one product that's like globally meaningful that's like made in only one location, you know, unless it's like food, you know what I mean?
Right.
But even then, you know, cultural exchange. But yeah, it's just like your Ford is not actually made in America. Like the parts come from many, many places.
Right.
And maybe it's like finally assembled in USA, but
Right.
even that's like probably a bit debatable.
Yeah.
Same thing with these big Italian designers. Usually what happens is China is the best technically advanced place to manufacture, period. I don't think that's that hard to believe. But, you know, I think it's like sometimes I think people have this idea that there's just these Chinese children working in like these slavery-like factories making clothes. And that definitely probably is in existence. But
It's
like
not exclusive to China.
yeah, but you think about like the technological advances that China just has in general, and people are just better at making shit in China. You know, so you go to China, like designers like Gucci or like, you know, Balenciaga, like they'll go to China to make their stuff because no one else can kind of deliver that type of technical like we can just make whatever you want whenever you want it. Like China's like Disneyland for just making shit because they can just do it. You know, like my tailors, I thought that I would have to give them patterns, but I didn't. I literally just showed them a picture and I was like, do you want my patterns? And they're like, no. You know,
We don't need your shit.
they just needed a picture and they were good. And it was like almost like flawless.
Yeah.
And these are just like some tailors.
Yeah, because this is a country that has perfected manufacturing for the last 3 to 4 decades.
It's one of the
You're
only
not gonna beat
countries-
them.
Yeah. like computer generated stuff, AI, amazing handicraft. You can't beat them.
Yeah.
So essentially what these big brands will do is like they'll kind of like design stuff in Italy, and then they'll like make honestly most of it in China, but then they'll do some of like the final assembly, or just like they'll play with the percentages so that they can say that it's made in Italy. But chances are it probably is made in China, if not Asia, you know, because nobody in Italy can make that mass slash technical advances there. Yeah, so I think it's just like, yeah, China has so much skill.
Check your assumptions.
It has so much technology, so much capability. They're so OCD. Everything's executed perfectly. And the reason why there are slavery-like conditions sometimes is because we as Westerners demand to pay no money for all these beautiful skills.
Yeah, the reason why there are slavery-like conditions is because people keep buying the stuff that supports those factories, right?
And it's like living wage is so low in a lot of these places in China, like a few dollars can change their lives, but we choose to not pay them those dollars. And that really, and we said we give that money to influencers to sell them at fashion shows, you know, but it's like a few dollars can really change people's lives.
Yeah.
So the slavery-like conditions aren't just like because the factory is like, we're just going to have slavery-like conditions.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of it's because there are no work for a certain subset of people. So they just happen to have this factory to fill that void. And those people can't get other jobs. Or it's just like you have to like fill your factory with workers for a certain price. And the most marginalized and lowest like agency people will fulfill those roles, you know, just by nature of how it is. Yeah, a lot of it is on us. Yeah.
Damn. Thank you so much for getting into it like that. I have been waiting for this kind of conversation with someone who is like dove in really deep about how things are actually made. And I really appreciate you being so vulnerable and honest about like not only building this brand, but your pricing, your margins. Thank you for being honest and transparent, because when we talk about setting the standard, being the trendsetter, like being the one who does this innovative thing first, other people seeing that it works and then following suit, like you being transparent about your pricing is so important.
Yeah. And it's like, I think, different for me, it's like I know that no one else can make the same shit that I'm making. So like, I'm not that pressed, but if you want to, you really should, so that we can give more money to those village ladies.
That's the beautiful thing about the like local, emerging, sustainable, slow fashion folks, because it's not so much about competition. It's like, great, if we can make the world a better place and still enjoy fashion, let's do it.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I would say is like about the the made in China stuff is like, I think just put it to the test. Get yourself an American tailor and ask them to do something. And then get yourself a Chinese tailor and ask them to do something. And I'm going to tell you, there's so many fashion school educated, Vogue covered seamstresses in America, and they cannot do jack shit. And compared to my tailor in China, who I just sent them a photo and they're like, we got it. No questions asked. And that's on craftsmanship. So, you know, you think made in China is not that great? Try it, compare. Yeah, you'll see that it's way better.
I really respect how deep you are. Like, from the meaning behind the clothing and what you do to the level of detail and thoroughness that you've gone to understand how things are made as well. Like, you're really thorough about this shit.
Thanks. Yeah.
Can I make a request?
Okay.
I would like to request that for like if you're doing like a fall or winter line or something like that, I would love like a puffer coat.
Low-key, we would love to make a puffer coat. I think
because
it'd be crazy.
I am so sick of being cold. I'm either like warm and it's just like the most boring ass puffer coat that I own, or I'm cold and miserable, but I look fashionable. I'm sick of that. And like, you know, like I know that there's like the Sandy Liang puffer and stuff, but I know that like, don't they make jackets out of these in China?
They can make anything. I feel like they could probably embroider some type of puffer.
Even like a panel of the embroidery on one of like the puffer sections would be sick, and then cost effective. And I would eat that shit up.
Okay, we'll think about it.
Because like San Francisco gets cold, New York definitely gets cold.
I hate the cold. It's hard to wear cunty clothes all season, you know.
True.
If you're weather sensitive. Honestly, I think like if you guys could go march up to your favorite boutique, like cool boutique, you know, we're not looking for ugly boutiques, and just be like, yo, would you guys want to sell these really pretty corsets? That would be awesome, because right now I'm doing that and I'm a bit shy. So I'm just like, hey, do you guys sell any new stuff? And I'm like whipping out my corsets from my tote bag. And so that's kind of what vending is looking like for us.
So you're in the process of going to different
retailers.
retailers and like wholesaling?
I'm thinking I'm like trying to stick to independent designer boutiques. So that's like vintage shops and thrifting shops that just happen to sell cool shit. Yeah, I think like the only way that Sour will be successful and really make a tangible impact on these ladies' lives is if we're able to scale it to a place where we can just continuously order things from them to give them consistent like living wage. Yeah, and so that's kind of the dream, and we're giving ourselves 5 years to do it. And right now we're kind of in this like API retailer hunt to try to get it in some stores. And we
Like
have
Chop
some
Suey
leads.
Club,
Yeah,
that
and like
kind of thing,
Lane Club in Los Angeles. So yeah, we're just trying to make it happen, make the magic happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that is our manifestation for 2025. Yeah.
Yay. So if you are interested in super cute, cunty, comfortable,
Yeah, if you want to sell this.
silk, hand embroidered clothes from Sour Gongju, they have also really cute mini skirts, which we can't really show you right now because we're sitting down. Check them out. I'll put their Instagram up here. And thank you so much for coming on the
Thanks for having
podcast.
me, letting me gap and all that nerdy fashion shit.
No, like literally what I live for.